Now imagine this. You hold your newborn baby in your arms, maybe give it a kiss. Then you put it in a specially designated compartment in a wall by a hospital or a fire station. You close the hatch and you walk away, never to see your child again. You haven't spoken to anyone, you haven't signed anything, you just dropped it off, and that's that. It's called the baby box, and it's increasingly being used in various countries, causing quite the debate. I'm Stefanie Dekker, and welcome to The Stream.
Now, what I'm showing in the image above translates into life hatch or baby hatch. When I first saw this, I was walking past it in the street and I was super shocked because there's nothing like this in the UK. And in fact, if you abandon your baby, especially if it's under 2 years of age, you get up to 5 years in prison.
Never gets old, does it?
Nope.
3 babies in less than a week.
Wow.
They're so trafficking babies.
Totally trafficking babies.
Hey.
Did you get a call?
Well, it's going off right now. Hold on.
Oh.
Baby boxes don't actually address the issues that are causing people to put babies in these boxes. If we cared about the women and the children involved in these issues, we would actually try to address the issues that lead to people putting babies in boxes to begin with.
Now, why are baby boxes spreading? Why do they even exist in the first place? And why would a mother leave her child there? Well, to talk about all of that, we are joined by Nadene Grabham, co-founder of Baby Saver South Africa and director of Door of Hope, which created the first modern baby box in 1999. And we have Marlene Greiner, co-founder of adoptee rights organization Bastard Nation and owner of the website Stop Safe Haven Baby Boxes Now. Now, before we start our conversation, ladies, because I want to just check in with you guys, if you're wondering what a baby box is and how it works, watch this.
When a parent walks up to our box, all they have to do is open the door, place their infant inside, close the door, grab the orange bag, and walk away. Once inside, emergency personnel will open the door. You can see that the infant is safe and secure inside. There's a 60-second delayed alarm that gives the parent time to get away. From there, dispatch will be called. They'll take the bassinet from the box and transport to the hospital.
Nadene, if I can start with you, it is such an emotional and loaded subject, isn't it? I want to start with a little bit about your organization. You, from what I understand, created the first modern, we should say, right, baby box in 1999. Why did you come up with this, the organization? What was the demand? What is it providing for?
So specifically in around April 99, the pastor of the Berea Baptist Church read a news article that an abandoned baby was found on the Queen Elizabeth Bridge in Hillbrow. And that same week, one of the elders of the church found an abandoned baby dead in one of their rubbish bins. The pastor then did some research, and it turned out that around 50 babies were abandoned monthly in Johannesburg. And many of these babies were found dead in the worst places you can imagine. So they came up with this idea to offer a safe alternative to mothers who are not able to care for their babies or don't want their babies, to instead of dumping them in toilets or sewage drains, is to rather place them safely in this baby box where they actually can have a chance at life.
Because just to clarify, because we have both of you on, you're in South Africa, Marley, you're in the US, there's different laws, right? In South Africa, if you abandon your child, it's a criminal offense, correct? Whereas Marley,
that is correct.
You're in the US and you can give up your child legally, right? You are opposed to baby boxes, I understand. Can you, on your website, I believe you list 5 reasons. Can you sum up for us what for you the issue is with the baby box?
Okay, there are so many issues. There's 3 big ones and there's subsets to those reasons. The first of all, as an adoptee rights activist, and I'm the executive chair and co-founder of the largest adoptee civil rights organization in the United States. This abrogates our rights to our birth records, our identity, our histories, our families, all kinds of things. Only 16 states actually permit full access to original birth certificates to adult adoptees. And when Safe Haven started, this was our issue, and it's grown since then.
So to understand, it's the concept of anonymity. Is this the main issue for
right?
you?
It's anonymity. I mean, the idea of putting a baby in a box in a wall, we don't like in general, but it's the anonymity that we object to. We've been fighting for more than 70 years to restore our rights to our identity. And this comes along and blows it up.
Because you were adopted, I understand, correct?
Yes.
For our audience, we're going to go into this a little bit later in the show, but for those of us who don't understand what it is like not to be born to known birth parents, like, explain to us the importance of that.
You go through your whole life. I was an adult when I got my records because I lived in a state where I could access them. And I won't get into how that happened, but it was like a whole, you don't know. From the time I was 3 years old, I had to have that information. I couldn't get it. It changes your entire life. You are not real anymore. You feel like you've been dropped out. I always felt like I was dropped out of an airplane or something. There's just this huge part of you that's missing. And when I saw that birth certificate, it was like this. I was surprised the relief that I got from that. It gives you context in history, and you know that you belong somewhere.
Nadene,
you don't have to do anything with that information.
Yes, sorry, I thought you were finished there. Yeah, because it's so difficult for those of us who haven't been through this to understand, right? Nadene, I believe you do understand, obviously, the complexities of this. How do you work with this? The concept of anonymity when these babies are dropped off. Of course, it is a lifeline, as you're saying. You're also saving lives because women feel shame, I guess. And I suppose in South Africa and in many countries, is there a stigma to this, the mother abandoning their baby, their child?
Yeah, so we as Door of Hope and as Baby Savers is very pro family preservation. We believe that a child belongs in a family, but we also understand that there are significant social issues in South Africa where this is not always possible. We also agree that every person has the right to know its culture, to know its identity, to know its heritage. But what Baby Savers is all about is the right to life. Because if you do not have life, all of these other rights cease to exist. And that is what we are focusing on, is saving a life which would else be abandoned and die, and then you don't have any of those things that matter.
Just to follow up, has there ever been a case where someone, as they grew up, wanted to try and find their birth parents? Is there any way that is possible under the baby box system? I suppose we have DNA these days. Like, how does that work? Is that even possible?
I must say that in South Africa, that our babies aren't always placed with no identifying documentation with them. The mother often leaves a hospital card or a clinic card where there is some identifying information, and then the social workers will follow up with this. There has been times where babies have been adopted into families that were safely relinquished through a baby saver, and these parents that have adopted them go through. They attend workshops where they also have support groups to deal with these type of questions that come. And I think any child that is abandoned or even a consented adoption want to know their birth families. And in many cases, it's actually not even an option. But we also strongly believe that, is it not better for a child to grow up that knowing that their mum safely relinquished them in a baby saver than to grow up knowing that their mum left him in a plastic bag on the side of the road or even near a river? Which is more traumatic?
Marlene, what would you say to that?
Okay, I would say that I'm not real familiar with the situation in South Africa, so I don't want to really comment on that. But in the United States, the reported number of discarded newborns or neonaticides is extremely small. It's about 30 a year. Now that there can be more, but that's the ones that are reported. There's no reporting system, so you have to go by the news. But there is absolutely no evidence that baby boxes have made any difference in the number. It's the same every year.
I wanted
30.
to ask you that actually, Marlene, because the US has laws that you can safely relinquish your baby, correct? So the question I suppose to ask is, why do you need baby boxes?
That's a good question. We don't know. There's some. I just saw some figures from Indiana, which is the center of the baby box movement in the United States, and there's 1,000 traditional safe haven locations, fire stations, hospitals, police stations, that parents can go to. And there's 150 baby boxes, and there's been 31 baby box cases in the state of Indiana. These babies, they're presented as being saved, but there's no evidence that anyone has ever been saved. One side of their mouth, they say, "Oh, we saved this baby, and we saved a life," and 30 seconds later, saying, "This mother loved this baby so much she would not have killed it."
Well, I wanted to jump in there. Actually, it's something that has been quite clear in research for this show, and I believe you both said it. Finances, economy seems to play a large part here, doesn't it? So it's not like, you have a very, very young mother who is completely out of her depth and struggling. The average age, it seems, is around mid-20s, and that finances, the lack of economic support, is what is leading to a lot of this. I'm going to just jump to Nadene, to you. Is that also a factor in South Africa?
Yes, thank you for that question. I also just want to add that in South Africa, research was done of how many babies are abandoned unsafely in South Africa, and it's around 3,500 babies that are abandoned unsafely in South Africa every year. And for every baby found alive, 2 babies are found dead. And in South Africa, it's not actually just the economy. You mentioned that moms are generally in their mid-20s. We have shocking statistics in South Africa on teenage pregnancies, where just in the year 2024, we had over 100,000 teenage pregnancies in South Africa. And just in one province, about 2,000 of these mothers were between the ages of 10 and 14 years old.
Wow.
That gave birth in 2024. So our social issues are actually quite devastating. And I do know that people often comment that instead of putting baby boxes there, why don't you rather fix the social issues? But in many cases, it is not always possible to fix these social issues. Poverty, teenage pregnancies, gender-based violence, rape are all huge, huge factors that lead to baby abandonment in South Africa.
Yeah, in fact, South Africa has one of the highest cases, I believe, of gender-based violence. And of course, these things, I was going to ask you, is the government doing enough? I know it's just called gender-based violence as a national emergency, but surely massive issues that are very different to the United States. Marlene, how much does the adoption system, the anti-abortion movement have to play into, let's say, baby boxes in the US, which again is such a different context than South Africa?
Right. First of all, we have not seen, and I think that the baby box people in the States too here have said the same thing. We have not seen any kind of appreciable spike in abandonments or in baby box usage or even traditional safe haven since Roe was overturned. But the adoption system basically is rooted in economics and misogyny, shame. I believe
very quickly, Marlene, can I jump in there? A quick question, because we're running out of time.
Sure.
It's the adoption system isn't regulated in the US. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
It is to some extent, but not totally. It's all private adoption agencies. A healthy white newborn in the United States could go for anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000. If you
Well,
adopt through the state, it's a couple thousand,
so yeah, it is.
but you're not going to get a whole lot of newborns.
Well, that's all we have time for this part of the show. Marlene and Nadene, thank you very much for talking to us on such an important subject. Now, the babies placed in baby boxes make their way into the adoption process. To discuss this larger system or the business, we are joined by Patricia Meyer, an adoption reform activist and author of Wonderland, A Black Market Baby's Rise from the Rabbit Hole. Patricia, you were listening in on that conversation. I have to say, I was listening to your pre-interview with our producer, Jassim, for the show, and your story really gave me goosebumps. Can you just tell our audience a little bit about who you are and where you came from?
Okay, great. Thank you for having me on the show. I am what's considered a black market baby. I was relinquished during the baby scoop era, which is a 30-year period from the 1940s to 1970s, where 1.5 million mothers relinquished their children. In 1970, the year that I was relinquished, there were 175,000 babies put up for adoption, and about 11,000 of those babies were actually sold on the black market. And what that meant for me was that I was handed over along a Texas hospital curb with no agency, no paperwork, no judges involved. My adoptive parents basically just drove away with me and spent their entire lives looking over their shoulders, fearful that someone was going to come back for their baby, because I was never given any paperwork. And later in life, at 13, I learned that I did not have, my adoptive parents didn't have my birth certificate or even know my true birthday. And at 18, I learned that there was no legal adoption ever occurred.
And why was that? Why did they never have the paperwork?
Well, you know, my adoptive parents were not your typical perfect families that the adoption system wanted for babies at the time. They were a mixed race couple. My father was a meat inspector, middle income. They were put at the bottom of very, very long waiting lists for babies. So they hired they went around the system and hired an attorney who represented both parties. And when they drove away, they thought they were going to be paying what they owed and then be receiving paperwork. 2 years into the system, 1.5 years or so, the attorney was extorting them for more money, and never delivering any paperwork. They got fearful that they were either going to have to go to the police or just disengage with him and raise a paperless child. And so ultimately, that's what they did. I ended up finding my biological family once as I got older, and I was able to finally get my first birth certificate at 47 years old. Up until that time, I was using what I believe to be what's called a delayed certificate of birth that was obtained with false facts. And then,
so Patricia, sorry to jump in there again, but this raises a question. How common is your case?
Of the 175,000 babies placed the year I was born, about 12,000 of those were black market babies. So I would say that there's a lot of people out there like me who are having trouble getting birth certificates, getting passports and things like that. So it's more common than you think. And even now, it's a $30 billion industry that's for profit, that isn't highly regulated. A lot of this can happen, especially when you have attorneys that are representing, private attorneys that are representing both sides, the adoptive parents and the birth parents. And for every baby that's relinquished, there are up to 45 babies. There are up to 45 adoptive parents wanting that one child. So it gets very competitive. And when you have one person who can play both sides against the other, there's a lot of room for corruption and coercion to take place. So I do believe that these problems do still exist. And internationally, international adoptions have declined by 95% since 2004. And that basically increases the demand for babies domestic babies in the United States. So we are a commodity, and we are treated like a commodity. And that's something that through my adoption advocacy, I blog at myadoptedlife.com. These are the sorts of things that I'm wanting to raise awareness for. And if I may, I'd like to speak a little bit on my view on the birth boxes.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, absolutely. What do you think of the baby box? Where does it fit into all of that?
I can't speak to what's happening in South Africa. I know that here they are very underused, but my primary concern is for these young mothers who are in a crisis of their own, who are going through a very difficult psychological and possibly are in physical jeopardy from giving birth, God knows where, in secrecy. They need help. And I don't know that they're getting the help they need when they're relinquishing children to these boxes. Who's looking out for them and what's going on with them through that process? My biggest one, actually, though, is that it strips the birth father from having any rights whatsoever to that child. And fathers have just as much rights to the child that they created as a first mother does. And when a child can just be dropped off randomly, that basically just cuts the birth father completely out of the system. You saw my reunion with my birth father there. He was 70 years old and never even knew I existed. And when I was relinquished, he was already raising a 4-year-old son. And he said, had he known that I existed, he would have raised me. And I would have been raised in my family with people that I look like, with no mystery around my adoption. He and I did have 11 wonderful years in reunion together. It was absolutely fantastic. But we both mourned those years that we do believe we feel were stolen from us.
We want to look at it from what you were mentioning there, actually, from the side of the mother, that of a parent. Abby gave up her baby in an open adoption, a practice where the biological and adoptive families have access to each other's information. But she says she was manipulated into giving up her baby. Take a listen.
Hi, my name is Abby, and I am what society commonly refers to as a birth mother. Open adoption, the concept of what it is and the promise of what it could be, is used by adoption profiteers as a coercive tool against women in crisis situations to make them feel as though they have power within the legal process of losing their power. Open adoption is not a legally binding contract, meaning hopeful adoptive parents can say literally anything they want to a woman who is considering relinquishing her parental rights and choosing them as her child's adoptive parents. And then once they've gained the power, once they have the parental rights, they can literally not follow through with any of the things that they promised her or insinuated, nothing. There's no legal ramifications for them turning tail, running away, and never speaking to her again. So when adoption profiteers try to make a woman feel as though there is power in her decision, as though she is empowered in choosing open adoption and developing relationship prior to delivery and relinquishing her rights, they are lying to her, they are manipulating her to feel as though she has a power that she in no way will legally have on the other side of giving up her parental rights.
Patricia, this unfortunately has to be the last answer. We've run out of time. But first, I want to get your reaction to that. Are women being coerced into giving up their babies? Is there enough support? And I suppose as a quick follow-up, is the institution, is government doing enough to give women support in dealing with this?
I absolutely do believe that there is a lot of coercion around birth mothers. I've met Abby several times at the adoption conferences that I speak at, and it is a very common story that there is a lot of coercion and pressure. In my birth mother's generation, it was about shame and societal norms. Today, it's basically telling mothers that they are financially unworthy of mothering if they don't have if they're financially unfit. And I would like to see a lot of the $16,000 tax credit that we give adoptive parents go towards supporting these first mothers who are being post jobs forced into giving births that they are not financially prepared for. But if we're going to do that, we need to help support them financially through a temporary crisis, because right now we're applying a permanent separation as the solution to what is truly a temporary financial crisis for these moms. Sociologist Gretchen Sisson, in her book Relinquished, she did a 10-year study on first mothers and found that as little as $1,000 would have made the difference to the difference between relinquishing and keeping their child. So when I think about $22,000 baby boxes, what that money could do to go to help one mother just for a year, maybe get her feet off the ground and get through the toughest part of bringing a baby into the world. So I would like to see our legislation support first mothers as well.
That is such an important and powerful point to end on. So much to talk about. Thank you so much, Patricia, for coming on and sharing your story. And thank you for being part of this important conversation. For me and the entire Stream team, I'll see you soon.